Welcome to Sentence Diagramming Part 2. So here is a review of a sentence we learned how to diagram during our first screencast. See if you can diagram this sentence, then come back and check your work. So check your work. Is this how you diagrammed this sentence? Before we move on to diagramming more complicated sentences, here's a screen to remind you of the formula to follow. Don't forget, begin by placing your subject, then your verb, then your direct object. Only then should you place items that go beneath the horizontal line, such as modifiers, adjectives, adverbs, prepositional phrases, and indirect objects. Okay, here's a sentence with a direct object. See if you can diagram this sentence, then come back and check your work. Okay, so here is the diagram for this sentence. Rose is your subject. Gave is your verb. What did she give? A gift. That's your direct object. The modifier a, which is one of 3 articles in English, goes beneath the horizontal line. There is no indirect object in this sentence. Try the next one, which does contain an indirect object. Okay, so following your formula, diagram this sentence with me, which contains both a direct object and an indirect object. Keep in mind, you cannot have an indirect object without a direct object. Here we go. Subject, Rose. Verb, gave. What did Rose give? Gift. That is your direct object, right there. In this case, however, we know the receiver of the gift, Kayla. So underneath our verb, Kayla. But we still have a word left. We still have this modifier, a, and that modifies gift. So it goes right underneath there. How did you do with that? Before we diagram a sentence with a prepositional phrase, let's review how to diagram just the prepositional phrase piece of it. So here you've got a piece of a diagrammed sentence, just the prepositional phrase. And the phrase is, in the forest. So in our sentence, it looks like this, in the forest. When we diagram it, the preposition goes on a slanted line. The noun, which is the object of the preposition, goes on a horizontal line. And any words that modify that object of the preposition go on a slanted line beneath it. So on the next screen, I'm going to give you just a few prepositional phrases. Try to diagram those before we move on to a sentence containing any prep phrases. Okay, here are 2 prepositional phrases for you to diagram. If you get stuck, go back to the previous slide and take a look at that example. When you think you're finished, come and check your work. Okay, so this is what you should have diagrammed for under a rock and in a tree. How did you do? Next slide, I'm going to give you a sentence containing a prepositional phrase. It will also contain modifiers, adjectives, and adverbs. And then we'll move on to a master sentence that contains also a direct and an indirect object. Okay, here is a relatively simple sentence that contains a prepositional phrase. My advice to you is to follow your formulas, subject, verb, modifiers, etc. But before you do any of that, check your sentence for a prepositional phrase. And if you see one, put a box around it or underline it and save it for last. So diagram this one and then come back and check your work. Okay, hopefully you were able to diagram this sentence correctly. Check your work. Here's your subject, pumpkin. Here's your verb, fell. Modifier for pumpkin, the, leaving you only with a prepositional phrase left to diagram. Where did it fall from? A wagon. That means it goes beneath your verb, from the wagon. Hope you got it. Here's a happy face for you. Okay, so here's your challenge sentence. I want you to look for subject, verb, and modifiers, but also look for direct, indirect objects, and a prepositional phrase. Good luck. Come back and check your work. All right, so how did you do diagramming this sentence with a subject, a verb, several modifiers, an object, an indirect object, and a prepositional phrase? Watch this video again if you are still confused about any part of this second round of sentence diagramming.